Jin hurried to BR's residence, where Chris dropped a shocking revelation. Jin was once a prince. Jin's eyes widened in disbelief. Chris continued, explaining that Jin wasn't the eldest son of the Nomlan family, but rather the illegitimate child of the king of Rosala. This confession had recently surfaced, causing turmoil within the royal palace. Just as Jin tried to process this bombshell, Will, Karen, and Bogart appeared before him, leaving him even more confused about what was happening. Desperate for answers, Jin demanded they take him to Ela and Esther. They led into a quiet room where Elsa and Esther were sitting with their heads lowered. Both wore ragged clothes and looked exhausted. Seeing them in such a state, Jin was furious. He demanded to know who had done this to them. Karen calmly replied that Elsa and Esther had asked for it themselves. Chris then clarified that because he and his mother couldn't treat slaves the same way they treated regular servants, the situation was delicate. The slaves would spark outrage if treated equally, so Elsa and Esther had requested only enough food to survive, as a way to atone for their sins and apologize to Jin. Still puzzled, Jin couldn't understand why they sought his forgiveness. That's when Will stepped in and explained everything. He revealed the true reason behind Jin's exile and why Elsa and Esther felt they were partly responsible. Becoming slaves, they believed, was the punishment they deserved for Jin's suffering. The weight of everything was too much for Jin to bear. He started by apologizing to Chris and the Sacred Flame for the trouble he had caused them. Karen reassured him, saying it was all right, and that she could handle Esther as a servant. Jin then walked over to Ela and Esther, gently asking them to stand. He told them that he had no intention of punishing them. He was just relieved to see they were safe, but they remained silent, unable to move. Karen had to nudge Esther to lift her head, and as soon as they did, both women apologized to Jin. Esther apologized for her family's actions against him, while Elsa expressed regret for not being able to protect him. Jin quickly interrupted, telling them not to blame themselves. It wasn't their fault. When Esther respectfully addressed him as Master Jin, it sparked anger in him. He shouted at her to stop, then pulled her into a tight embrace, assuring her that they were still family. Tears flowed as Esther cried in his arms. Afterward, Elsa and Esther were taken inside to change into their normal clothes. Jin thanked the members of the Sacred Flame for everything they had done and promised to send them some gifts in return. He also reassured Esther that he would look after her until she was fully grown. Jin declared that he wanted to free Esther right away, but he couldn't leave her alone until the situation in Rosala had settled down. For now, being associated with Karen's name was safer, since she was an S-rank adventurer. Despite Jin's wishes, Esther and Ella insisted on continuing to serve him. Jin, however, silenced them firmly. His true status was now becoming clear. Jin wasn't just anyone. He was also the illegitimate son of the king of Rosala. Will informed them that both the king and crown prince had been removed from the throne, leaving a power vacuum. Even the queen had filed for divorce, and her home country had dissolved their alliance with Rosala. It was only a matter of time before war erupted in the kingdom. Back in Rosala, the former head of the Nomlan family had been sentenced to death, and Gordon Nomlan was thrown into prison. The crown prince found himself trapped within the walls of his palace. He muttered bitterly about the nobles, sitting alone when his father, the king, entered the room. The prince turned to look at him, but before he could say a word, the king struck him with his scepter. Furious, the king blamed his son for everything that had gone wrong and continued beating him until the prince took his final breath. In his last moments, the prince realized he had left the world behind. Yet even in death, he harbored a deep hatred for Jin, directing all his anger toward him. As his life faded, he repeatedly whispered Jin's name. At that very moment, a large magic circle appeared in the dungeon beneath Gale. Jin spent 2 weeks in the capital, during which he took the academy's exam. Once he completed it, he decided to return to jail with Esther and the rest of his group. When they'd arrived, Esther warmly greeted Yin and Na. She was wearing the armor Jin had gifted her, ready for battle. Given Esther's skills, Jin thought it would be a great idea to spend 3 days fighting orcs near the gate, giving her some solid training. He believed that by the end of those days, Esther would be fully prepared to join them in tackling the next floor. Ian, however, questioned if it was too soon for Esther to start hunting orcs. But Esther confidently reassured him, explaining that she had experience hunting monsters during her time with House Nomlin, and had even fought a few lower-level creatures on her journey to Quoll. Still, she couldn't help but feel a bit sad remembering that she had done all of that while dressed in a servant's uniform. Jin then told Esther she had a natural talent for wind magic. So, in addition to mastering her spear skills, she needed to work on improving her magic and mana levels as well. Na chimed in, asking if Esther would need to drink lots of mana potions like he did, and Jin confirmed it. Na got excited, laughing at the thought that he wouldn't be the only one embarrassed by needing to use the bathroom so often. As they prepared to head to Gao, Jin instructed Anzi and Mimosa to watch over the house while they were away. Elle also joined them wearing her maid's uniform. Jin had equipped Anzi and Mimosa with magical weapons, and they promised to only use them if things took a dangerous turn in Gao. Jin introduced Esther to Mona, and as they exchanged greetings, he asked if anything had changed during his absence. Mona's expression darkened, and she turned to Jin with a serious question. Did he know about named monsters? Jin admitted he had only heard of them in passing. Mona explained that although rare, sometimes the souls of the dead take control of monsters. These creatures are known as named monsters. What makes them particularly dangerous is that they retain their memories, intelligence, and even the ability to speak. They also resemble how they looked when they were alive. Then, with a heady tone, she revealed the unsettling news. The orc general they had defeated on the 15th floor had returned as a named monster. Jin wondered if the monster had grown stronger because it had developed human-like intelligence. However, Mona quickly assured him that the opposite was true. In fact, the monster had become weaker. She speculated that the creature must have faced some serious issues in its past life. Predicting the orc's attacks used to be easy, but now it's even simpler. It spots women and immediately gives chase. Many weaker groups had successfully defeated it by using female members as bait. They even started calling it a dork, combining the words orc and dork. As floor 15 became increasingly easy to clear, a new problem emerged. Long lines were forming at the entrance to floor 16. Lower-level adventurers were taking too long to complete floor 16, causing a backlog and even sparking arguments in the queue. Mona asked Jin to assist anyone they encountered along the way. Jin confidently reassured her, saying he could cast healing spells on the entire party if needed. On the 15th floor of Gao, Esther was battling several orcs using her magic. With a spell called Air Slicer, she swiftly took down most of them. Ian couldn't help but notice how much Esther had improved in just a few days. Esther herself was thrilled with her growth and newfound strength. Jin admitted he was initially concerned that Esther might only be good at stabbing with her spear, but now she was even using advanced slicing techniques. Meanwhile, Nina wondered how Esther could keep going without taking a break, constantly chugging potions. After a short rest, they decided to move on to the next floor. Esther's level had skyrocketed from 23 to 57 in just 3 days. Now, the only thing standing in their way was the orc general. Jin insisted on leading the charge, even though the general was weakened, just to be cautious. He also advised Nina to stay behind, as the monsters tended to behave strangely around women. Suddenly, the orc general emerged from a swirling magic circle, shouting Jin's name. Jin quickly checked its status and realized the general was Elliot, the crown prince. As the orc approached, Jin announced what he had discovered, saying it must be fate that brought them together again. Determined to handle this himself, Jin launched several fire attacks, but the orc remained unharmed. Jin had hoped his fire magic, which he had just learned, would be effective, but it seemed he wasn't quite skilled enough yet. The orc spotted Esther and immediately started shouting, "Woman! Woman! Woman!" Furious, Esther yelled back that he was a man and charged at the orc with his spear. Seizing the opportunity, Jin struck the creature from behind. The orc turned to Jin and began shouting his name once more, launching a wild series of attacks. However, Jin dodged each one effortlessly and finished the fight with a single blow to the orc's head. Afterward, Esther informed Jin that the crown prince had been overthrown, according to Will's report, and was likely facing execution. Jin remarked that he had heard souls with intense grudges tend to be reborn as monsters, implying that Elliot must have harbored deep resentment. To Jin, this seemed fitting. By possessing a monster in Gale, Elliot's spirit would be trapped there forever, endlessly respawning just to be defeated by adventurers seeking experience points and items. Jin and the group continued fighting through waves of monsters until they reached the 20th floor. This floor was the most popular in the dungeon, known as the Crystal Area, teeming with all sorts of gems and stones, attracting many adventurers. Jin mentioned that he wanted to make some money, and he'd heard that raw emeralds and diamonds could be found here. Excited, Nina and Esther eagerly volunteered to mine. Jin pulled out some mining tools from his item box, and he suggested a spot for Esther to dig, using his expertise in material evaluation to assess the mineral-rich geology. Nina, Esther, and Ian each started digging in different areas. Nina and Esther were thrilled when they uncovered emeralds, their excitement bubbling over like kids on a treasure hunt. Jin watched them with amusement, reminded that despite everything, they were still young. Ian, though also enjoying the digging, had a more practical mindset. He was laser-focused on selling the gems for a profit. Meanwhile, Jin decided to create a golem using the minerals around him. He'd have been practicing earth magic and thought a golem would be perfect for mining. Though he used mana to keep it going, the golem couldn't last long without his constant supply of energy. Guilds often warned about the many traps and dangers lurking in the lower levels, which is why golems were sometimes used to trick enemies. As Jin and the others heard some noise nearby, the golem continued mining while they went to investigate. It turned out to be a dispute between two lower-ranked clans, Depths of Purgatory and the Envoys. Jin couldn't help but find the whole situation ridiculous. Moving on to the 21st floor, it felt more like a sunny meadow than a dungeon. Jin mentioned a creature called the Green Rabbit that lived there. Its meat was incredibly delicious, better than orc meat, even. He and Esther had tasted it back when they were nobles, but it was hard to come by in big cities, making it very expensive. Just thinking about it made Nina's stomach growl with hunger. Suddenly, Jin remembered Mona mentioning there had been more casualties recently, and he hoped they would all stay safe. As they continued walking, they spotted something gruesome nearby, giant ants feasting on a human corpse. Before long, Jin tirelessly hunted down green cows until he was satisfied with the amount of meat he had gathered. Nina then drew her knife, ready to prepare the meat, and Esther quickly offered to help. As the group settled down to enjoy their meal, they were pleasantly surprised. The green calf meat was far tastier than they had expected. While surveying the area, they noticed plenty of white cows and minotaurs roaming nearby. Ian pointed out that this region was teeming with cow-like monsters. Though the white cow meat tasted similar to the green cows, their milk was incredibly delicious. On the other hand, minotaur meat wasn't good at all. Its only use was for crafting, and their axes were far too heavy for any human to wield. Just then, Jin realized Esther had improved her wind magic. He suggested she try casting the air tornado spell she'd been practicing. Esther was thrilled. She could now provide even more support to the group. However, Jin warned her not to get too excited, reminding her that air tornado had a shorter range than cyclone. As Jin decided it was time to continue their journey, something unexpected happened. A weary adventurer came stumbling towards them, carrying an unconscious companion. Jin quickly asked what had happened, and the man, with a sense of urgency, told them to retreat immediately. Curious about what was going on, Jin asked for an explanation. The adventurer revealed that they had stumbled upon an ant nest nearby and had the misfortune of encountering a swarm of ants. When asked about the fate of their other companions, the adventurer feared that they had already become the ants' next meal. Jin admitted he had never faced ants before, but offered to heal the wounded duo in exchange for more information. As Jin and Ian treated their injuries, one of the adventurers described how tough it was to fight the ants, which attacked viciously with their front claws and sprayed a corrosive acid. Despite their hard shells, the ants had a weakness. They were vulnerable to fire. Jin quickly realized they weren't well equipped for such a battle, as their fire magic skills were still limited, and they mainly relied on water and wind spells. The adventurer explained that the ants were extremely protective of their queen, and taking her down would require a lot of fighter power, usually only possessed by certain magical clans. As the other adventurer regained consciousness and thanked them for their help, they warned Jin and Ian to steer clear of the ants before departing the area. Ian noticed the worried look on Jin's face and asked what was wrong. Jin simply told the group to hurry towards the 24th floor while staying cautious. The group moved quickly, but as they ventured deeper, they suddenly found themselves in the middle of a strange, open area. Just as they began to check their map, the cows nearby sensed something, panicking and stampeding past Jin and the others. Jin heard a distant rumble and wondered if an earthquake was about to strike. Na, looking tense, urged Jin to look ahead. In the distance, 3 adventurers were being chased by a swarm of giant ants. A female mage frantically tried to fend them off using fire magic. She managed to burn a few, but the rest retaliated by spewing acid. The acid hit the mage's arm, causing it to melt painfully. Watching them struggle, even with fire magic, Jin questioned whether his own group had any chance of handling the thousands of ants swarming their way. Esther and Na, filled with concern, asked what they should do. Ian coldly suggested they could save themselves by leaving the others to die. Esther and Na were shocked by his ruthless proposal. Jin agreed that escaping was likely their safest option, but he knew the guilt would weigh heavily on the younger members if they abandoned the others. After a moment of thought, Jin instructed the group to scatter the ants with their spells and keep their mana up by drinking plenty of potions. Taking charge, he led the group, fully shouldering the responsibility of their safety as the leader. At that moment, the 3 adventurers spotted them and shouted that they should run too. Jin told them to flee, explaining that his group was buying them time. The adventurers called him crazy, but soon recognized Jin as the renowned mage. Jin shouted back that they would escape too when the timing was right. The adventurers, grateful for the support, quickly fled, thanking Jin as they disappeared from sight. Jin unleashed a powerful water cyclone, breaking the formation of the ant swarm. Esther quickly followed up with her air tornado, combining it with spear strikes, while Ian used his wind magic to scatter the ants further. Nina, not to be left out, hurled water balls at the advancing creatures. But no matter how hard they fought, the ants kept swarming relentlessly. Jin drank another potion, realizing that their efforts were inefficient. They couldn't rely on fire magic, which left them at a disadvantage. Though he and Ian had large mana reserves, the younger members didn't have nearly as much to spare. Thinking fast, Jin ordered Esther and Na to stay close, casting a water wall around them for protection. He told them to drink some potions and recover while he assessed their next move. Should they hold their ground or make a risky dash towards the Ant Queen? Jin knew that taking down the larger ants at the rear would weaken the swarm, but the Queen was too far out of reach. As he scanned the battlefield, he noticed a few ants that looked different from the rest. From their appearance, Jin guessed these were ant generals commanding the swarm. He quickly decided to act, pulling out some orc meat to use as bait. He threw the chunks into the chaos, and the ants immediately swarmed toward the food, distracted. Seizing the moment, Jin sprinted toward the nearest general and swiftly decapitated it. The ants around him started moving erratically, confused. Seeing the tide turn in their favor, Jin called out to Ian, instructing him to scatter more orc meat with his wind magic. At the same time, he ordered Ian to target the remaining generals with long-range spells if the swarm began to regroup. Esther and Nina were ready for action, and Jin gave them clear instructions to support and protect Han. He was counting on them to hold the line as he made his way towards the Ant Queen, determined to take her down. Jin scattered pieces of orc meat, and Ian used his wind magic to hurl the chunks randomly across the battlefield, distracting the ants. Esther and Na unleashed their own wind spells to strike down any ants that got too close, while Ian swung his katana, cutting through the ones that managed to approach. Meanwhile, Jin pressed forward, relentlessly casting Water Cyclone to clear a path through the swarming ants. His heart raced and sweat dripped from his brow as he finally reached the queen ant. Towering over him like a 7-foot-tall basketball player, the massive creature loomed above, her screech of fury echoing through the air. Jin gritted his teeth, gripping his sword tightly, bracing himself for the fierce battle ahead. Jin couldn't help but feel uncertain. Even though the queen's powers weren't overwhelmingly strong, he doubted his sword would be able to harm her. When the queen hurled acid in his direction, Jin quickly dodged, responding with a fireball aimed straight for her head. The queen screamed as the attack landed, immediately redirecting her fury toward Jin. Her attacks came in waves, but Jin dodged them with ease, finding them clumsy and predictable. However, he still struggled to figure out how to deal a truly effective blow. His limited speed was proving to be a frustrating challenge. Then, inspiration struck. Jin recalled a tactic Dan once used. Large bodies can't maneuver well in tight spaces. With this in mind, Jin shifted his strategy and began targeting the queen's legs, aiming to shatter her joints and turn the tide of battle in his favor. But just as he gained momentum, a swarm of ants from the queen's army suddenly attacked, spewing acid. Taken aback, Jin shouted in frustration, warning them not to mess with him. Before the ants could overwhelm him, a powerful gust of wind sent them flying. It was Ian, holding back his magic as he yelled for the others to keep the ants away from Jin. With little time and mana left, and their potions nearly depleted, the tension on the battlefield grew intense. Everyone rushed forward, knowing the fight was far from over. Jin unleashed his magic, aiming to take down the ant queen. She launched another attack, but Jin swiftly dodged. Desperate, the queen tried to close the distance between them, but her legs began to crack under the pressure and soon shattered completely. Jin realized that her armor would no longer be enough to protect her. With her joints destroyed, the queen collapsed to the ground, defeated. Meanwhile, his allies were busy holding back the swarm of ants surrounding them. The queen, refusing to give up, attempted to hit Jin with acid, but he dodged effortlessly, telling her to stop resisting. Moving with precision, he landed a powerful blow, breaking the horn on her head. Jin hoped that with her legs shattered and consciousness fading, she would be powerless to continue fighting. As Jin charged at her one final time, the queen let out a piercing scream. With a swift strike, Jin cut through her armor and split her in half. The queen took her last breath and died. The moment she fell, panic spread among the ant army. The rest of the group maintained their defense as the ants began to scatter in chaos. Na observed the scene, noting that the ants were retreating because their queen had been slain. Esther rushed over to Jin, assuring him that her brother was safe. Jin sighed in relief, glad that no one had been injured, but the weight of the battle still hung over him. He realized that one wrong move could have led to their downfall in the labyrinth. Apologizing for his recklessness, Jin admitted his mistake. Ian, however, reassured him with a smile, grateful that they had all survived. Esther nodded in satisfaction, saying their plan had worked. They decided to use wind magic to gather everything and head back outside. Nina mentioned that it would be tricky to account for everything they had collected. Esther then suggested that, since Jin had defeated an A-rank ant queen, he would likely be granted a temporary A rank as well. Jin wasn't so sure, though. Everything had happened so quickly, and he hadn't had time to fully process it. A few days later, at the Gamble branch of the Adventurers Guild, Jin found himself worried. He had risked his life as a mage and feared he might face consequences for it. But to his surprise, Mona approached him with a smile, telling him he had actually helped B-rank adventurers and deserved a reward. She handed him 3 platinum coins, something that, in Jin's mind, was equivalent to around 300,000 Japanese yen. Shocked, he asked if it wasn't too much, but Mona reassured him, explaining that it was the going rate for saving lives. She emphasized how crucial their help had been and how much she cared about Jin's safety. Jin, feeling the weight of her words, thanked her, realizing how close the situation had been. Mona excused herself to inform the guild master, leaving Na behind to mention just how concerned Mona had been for Jin's well-being. Jin felt a sense of comfort in knowing she cared. Afterward, Dan entered the room and spoke with Jin. He had heard about Jin's victory over the ant swarm, but rather than praise him, Dan believed Jin had overestimated his abilities, putting his friends in danger while trying to help others. He questioned why Jin had risked his life instead of returning to Rosard. Before Jin could answer, Esther jumped in, challenging Dan's audacity to speak to her brother that way. Dan brushed off her concerns, reminding her that his position as guild master gave him the right to voice his opinion. Jin stepped in, acknowledging Dan's point and agreeing to be more cautious in the future. But Dan scoffed at Jin's promise, suggesting that he reflect more deeply on his actions. Then, Dan shifted the conversation, delivering important news to Jin. He revealed that the guild master from Korta had contacted him. Nobles from Rosara had unexpectedly arrived, disguised as merchants, and were seeking a bodyguard. Their true goal? To bring Jin back to Rosara and make him their king. Esther was outraged, unable to believe the nerve of these nobles after they had cast Jin out. Jin, confused, asked why Dan was even telling him this. Dan explained that the guild was bound by rules of legality and neutrality, especially in international matters. Jin considered informing King Qual about these developments and asked Dan if they knew the identity of the nobles involved. Dan admitted they hadn't figured it out yet and asked for Jin's thoughts. Jin speculated that Marus Painter, a notoriously cruel noble, could be behind it. Dan reassured him that Tanner had no idea Jin was in Gale and was searching for him elsewhere. This made Jin contemplate reaching out to Chris and the Holy Fire group for support. Before he could act, Mona interrupted, expressing her concerns about the recent encounter and how it might affect their ongoing investigation. Jin quickly reassured her that, while the mining operations had been paused during the chaos, their overall progress hadn't been significantly hindered. Mona suggested filing a complaint with the head of the clan, which Jin agreed to, though he noted the clan's interference in guild matters was problematic. Dan grumbled about how much trouble this situation was causing, and just as Jin was about to ask more questions, Dan abruptly left, clearly frustrated. The conversation then shifted to a middle-aged man who was fiercely debating Jin's recent actions. He emphasized the gravity of the situation, especially since it involved an S-rank clan. The group collectively agreed that something needed to be done and proposed avoiding direct contact with Jin for the time being. Meanwhile, another meeting was taking place. The guild had officially lodged a complaint against the clan and their envoys. They debated the importance of territory versus other pressing issues, when one member revealed a chilling order from the Kingdom of Nazar. Jin was to be eliminated. Deep within the depths of the Purgatory Flames, a large group of adventurers gathered on the Gel lands. Their leader, hailing from the nearby nation of Nazar, had sent scouts into the Kingdom of Quo with a crucial mission: to eliminate the Enchanter Queen. Melissa faced a tough challenge. She had to bring her son-in-law back to Nazar. But Elliot had already exiled Jin. Dragging him back was no easy task, and leaving him unchecked would be a grave threat to their nation. Time was running out. They had to act fast before Jin became even more dangerous. Failure meant death, so they needed volunteers willing to take the risk. One of them stepped up, confident in their knowledge of the labyrinth's secrets. They were aware that the mages they faced were formidable enemies. To outsmart Jin, this volunteer disguised themselves as a messenger from an envoy. Even if they slipped up, Jin would likely dismiss it as a simple mistake from a lowly envoy. But one wrong move could crack the fragile peace between them and put the Kingdom of Quo in grave danger. It was a dangerous gamble, requiring precision and patience. A few days later, the group gathered again, ready for their next move. Jin reported that their recent battles had significantly improved their skills. Ian's magic level had skyrocketed past 100, thanks to the powerful artifacts belonging to Gina. Meanwhile, Nina, now 13, had started asking everyone to call her Big Sister. They all felt stronger after conquering the 26th floor, which had been crawling with giant ants. From there, their journey seemed to smooth out, but they knew the real challenge was still ahead, the cold zone, beginning on the 26th floor. Jin prepared himself for the harsh conditions ahead by purchasing warm clothing, something he'd never really done before. Esther questioned whether all that gear was necessary, as Rosara and Korda had consistent climates year-round. But Jin, recalling the icy winters from his past life in Japan, knew better. This time their priority wasn't mining or searching for artifacts, it was survival. Together, they pressed forward, battling monsters as they pushed through the cold. When they reached the 26th floor, the chilling air hit them hard. Jin, like the others, felt the sharp cold. He remarked that even Japan wasn't this freezing. They knew stopping for too long could lead to frostbite, so they set about blocking the wind and warming up their surroundings. Jin created an air barrier and reminded the team to conserve their energy, as their rest time would be short with the dungeon boss looming ahead. It was tough, but they had no choice. They had to keep moving. As they sheltered themselves from the snowstorm, Ian's sharp eye suddenly spotted a snow tiger creeping toward them. The hungry beast charged at full speed. Jin quickly launched water arrows, striking the tigers while Ian finished them off with a swift air blade. After the battle, Ian pointed out that due to the weather, they probably couldn't eat the tigers, and hunting in this cold was going to be tough. Jin's water arrows had frozen into massive ice popsicles from the extreme cold. Na, puzzled, asked what he meant by ice popsicles, thinking they might not have sweet treats like that in this part of the world. Suddenly, an idea struck Jin, one he was sure Na would love. After some time, they finally reached the 30th floor, where the dungeon boss awaited. They took 2 days to strengthen their physical abilities before proceeding. Jin couldn't help but wonder how other adventurers managed to prepare for such challenges. Suddenly, he conjured up a pile of leftover alchemical metal, leaving the others in shock. Using it, he created golems that started shoveling snow into barrels. Esther, curious about his actions, asked what it was for, but Jin simply replied, "You'll see soon enough." Inside the boss chamber, Akran, the dungeon boss, appeared. Jin quickly warned everyone to stay alert, as Akran was capable of killing with a single bite. Defeating it would be tough since direct hits were nearly impossible. They needed to rely on agility and magic to stand a chance. As the monster lunged at them, Jin unleashed a whirlwind, followed by a torrent of water, and even considered blinding the beast with arrows. Luckily, their combined magic overwhelmed Akran, and the monster collapsed, coughing up blood. Jin was startled by how quickly they succeeded, but they had won. Though Jin admitted he didn't have any special skills and mainly relied on his stats, Esther reassured him that their magic would grow stronger as they leveled up. As they prepared to move on, Jin pointed out a nearby safe zone where they could rest. The area was crowded with people, likely from envoy groups or the Purgatory Flames. Then, someone called out Jin's name. It was Leon, who approached with a grin, reminding Jin of the time he had offered them orc stew. Jin recognized him as a member of the Elder Tree clan. Leon suggested they move to a spot a bit farther from the other two clans. As they began cooking, Jin offered milk from a white cow and they agreed. The children drank it and soon fell asleep, worn out from the cold. Jin asked Leon how many members of the Lime clan were present. Leon explained that they were the third squad, supporting the first and second squads while maintaining communication with the surface. 3 other squads from different clans were also stationed on lower floors for support. Jin realized that some of them might have been stuck down there for up to a month, and he couldn't help but think they probably smelled pretty bad. Leon caught his expression and chuckled, admitting there wasn't much they could do about it. Water was too precious for washing when it was needed for drinking. Jin then suggested a trade: fresh drinking water in exchange for information about the lower floors, from floors 31 to 35, which were known to be tropical forest zones. According to Leon, many adventurers were currently trapped in the freezing zones, and even the guilds were desperate for more information about what lay ahead. Apparently, One of the clans had been trying to sell valuable intel about those areas. Jin saw an opportunity. If they could create maps and guides for the forest zone, it could turn into a profitable venture. He handed over the water and thanked Leon, who in turn wished Jin good luck on his journey. At that moment, someone was secretly watching as Jin and his group descended to the 31st floor. It didn't take long for them to discover the jungle. Unlike the freezing cold zones they had just left, this area was hot and humid. Their mission was to explore, gather information, and map out the terrain. Jin saw a chance to make some money by selling these maps to the guilds. He didn't think it would be too difficult and encouraged the group to give it a shot. Na, however, complained about the unbearable heat. Jin agreed and, without hesitation, pulled out a barrel of snow. From it, he prepared a special treat, white cow's milk sherbet. The others looked at him curiously, unsure what it was. Jin recalled how Nina had once asked him about sherbet, and he had secretly prepared it in a safe spot earlier. Na took a bite and immediately praised the flavor, with Ian also enjoying the cool, refreshing taste. Jin explained that to make it, you just had to add sugar to milk and chill it. The milk was already rich enough, so no cream was needed. Ian joked that Jin could easily sell such a unique dish. Jin responded that in his world, this was actually a common treat. Esther asked where he learned about it, and Jin casually mentioned he had read about it in the library. He also shared a trick he discovered to stay cool. You could freeze slime jelly, wrap it in cloth, and place it on your head or in your pocket to cool yourself down. Ian, always the businessman, immediately started thinking about how much something like that could sell for. Born and raised a merchant, he couldn't help but see the opportunity. Just as they were about to continue exploring, Ian suddenly stopped. Ahead of them, two men were arguing, cursing as they spoke. The conversation was shocking. They were discussing a mission to kill Jin. Apparently, both the king and the princess were eager to see him dead. Jin's mind raced. Was the former Queen Rosard behind this? Then he overheard something even more troubling. The people from Purgatory, deep within the dungeon, always knew Jin's whereabouts thanks to intel from the guild master. That's when Jin realized something crucial. Dan, the guild master, was connected to the Purgatory clan.